All right, today we're going to do a little presentation on population growth, different types of population growth, and some limiting factors that have an effect on population growth. So our first type of population growth is exponential growth. And exponential growth is where you grow at an exponential rate, which means you're going to grow really fast. So one individual in a short amount of time, bacteria can reproduce in about a half an hour. So one individual becomes 2, a half an hour later they're 4, half an hour later they're 8, half an hour later they're 16, and it goes on and on and on like that for a long time until they run out of resources. If it could keep going on and on like that forever, then one cell would cover the entire Earth. But there are limited resources, and so it can't go on and on like that forever. But as long as there's food, bacteria can reproduce really well. And so can viruses, as long as they have vectors to grow in. Viruses like to grow in people. They like to infect people. And so recently we've had to deal with the COVID virus. And the COVID virus is an airborne virus that spreads from person to person through breathing and coughing and those types of things. And we have found that wearing masks is significant in reducing the spread of this virus. Here's an example of showing if you have no action. So if nobody wore masks, this is how fast it would spread. Okay, you'd go from one infection becoming in 10 days, on average 2.5 infections. And then in 60 days, you'd have a few more cycles, and you'd have 400 infections from that first infection, first infected person. If about half the people wear masks, which is relative to what we see, I think, in Branch County a lot of the time, you get a little slower spread of the virus. And if you have lots of people wearing masks, 75 to 80% of the population wearing masks, the virus spreads much slower still. This is like New York, and this is Branch County, and this is places where people just don't wear masks. So when the virus gets in, it spreads pretty fast. This is exponential growth. So it kind of grows out of control. It's slow for a while, but then once it gets rolling, it kind of grows out of control. This cannot last forever because there's limited resources. And so once the limits of those resources are reached, you have to level off or crash. So this is an example of how the virus numbers went up so fast this spring and summer. One person could infect up to 3 others, and then they can infect up to 3 others, and then all of them can infect up to 3 others, and so on and so forth. And so you get this real fast growth of the virus. Wearing masks is going to reduce this spread quite a bit, and so we don't see nearly as much of that spread in society. Another type of growth is called logistic growth. Logistic growth is when we grow really fast for a short period of time, but then we reach what we call the carrying capacity. And a carrying capacity is kind of an equilibrium that's reached when predators and the amount of food and all the other limiting factors in your area slow down the growth of your population. You don't just level off. You don't get to like a carrying capacity and just level off. What you tend to do is overshoot and then get adjusted and overshoot and get readjusted and overshoot. So animals aren't like leveling off at a carrying capacity, but they reach that carrying capacity and then kind of oscillate around the carrying capacity. So what types of factors are going to have an effect on population growth? Well, there's a couple different things. There's density dependent factors, and those are factors that are going to be dependent on population size. And there are density independent factors, and population sizes doesn't matter. So some density dependent factors are things like predation. The more predators you have, the harder it is for your population to grow. Okay. Competition. The more competition for mates, okay, the harder it is for an organism to survive and reproduce. Competition for water. Okay, there's a water hole in Africa, and organisms are competing to get a drink. Competition for food. This is a lion kill, and hyenas are trying to steal the kill from the lion. Disease. When the populations get real high, the amount of disease and the ability for disease to spread goes up. So disease is a population dependent factor. And then you have some density independent factors. Okay, so with these, it doesn't really matter how big the population is or how small the population is, they're all going to die. Okay, so when a fire goes through, it doesn't care like how dense the pine trees are or how spread out the pine trees are. It's going to burn them all down. Okay, so after the fact, like after a fire, this is what it looks like. Okay, it doesn't matter if they're densely populated trees or less densely populated trees. If they burn up, they burn up. And so in a lot of the other things that live here, some things can run away. You have things like elk and deer, they can run away from fires. But things like spiders can't, squirrels can't. Fires move pretty fast. And so a lot of organisms will be stuck up in trees or on bushes or whatever, and they're just going to burn up. So a lot of organisms die when fires rip through. Some organisms get away, but a lot of organisms die. A tsunami can have a major effect. That's a giant tidal wave. You can see here's a picture of a little island city before and after. So you can see a tsunami has quite an effect on the environment, and it's going to kill a lot of stuff, regardless of what size the population is. You could have had 20 people living on this island, or you could have had 10,000 people living on the island. Doesn't matter. It's going to wipe them out. Tornado. Here's a neighborhood, a before and after of a neighborhood. Here's the neighborhood before. This is the same neighborhood afterwards. Okay, that's pretty devastating. Devastating. You're not going to have a whole lot survive tornadoes. Okay, trees don't survive. Animals have a hard time surviving. Tornadoes are pretty destructive, and they will have a major impact on the environment. So those are the types of things that really don't, it doesn't matter how big the population is. If it's a major destructive force, it's going to kill big or small populations.